Hey folks, if you're just tuning in to the live stream, welcome today. We'll get going in just a few minutes here. But be sure to let me know in the chat where you're coming from today. I would love to hear from you. Also, I will be welcome to take any questions that you have about Obsidian or what we're doing or just chatting throughout the stream today as well. So feel free to pop those in the chat too. We'll try to take them as I'm able to. But yeah, I'm just going to hang out here for a little bit. Enjoy the day, do a little bit of digging into some books. I've got a couple picked out today, looking at a lot of Simon Sinek's stuff. Magical Cherubim, welcome from Berlin, Germany. Nice to have you here with us today. But yeah, we're gonna be taking a look at a couple of different things. Probably have about a 30-minute or 40-minute live stream or so today. Nothing too crazy long, but yeah, just wanted to hang out and do some notes. If you haven't joined a live stream yet, grab a project or your own set of notes and find something to think through as we're doing it here on the stream together. And let me know too if you're able to hear the music through the stream, if it's coming through, if it's too quiet or if it's too loud. I can always make some adjustments to that as well as we go. If you're just joining and you're not familiar with effective remote work, we're a resource for remote workers who want to live the best lives that they possibly can. One of the ways that we focus on that here on this YouTube channel is through talking about Obsidian and note-taking and personal knowledge management, productivity, and things of that sort. I have found personally as a remote worker for the last 10 years or so that these things are really helpful and beneficial for processing not only my world, but also the work that I do. I've found it to be really helpful to have a note-taking software where I'm collecting ideas and things of that sort, because it not only helps me with doing things here with effective remote work, but for my full-time day job that I have, as well as just general life stuff, tracking things that I'm interested in and ideas, because I'm a very theoretical, idea-oriented person. Magical Cherubim, did you stumble upon any exciting plugins recently? You know, to be honest with you, I haven't done too much tweaking or adding extra stuff to my Obsidian Vault at this time, the last few months. I haven't really spent a lot of time doing that. I've tried to focus more on just like taking notes. Probably the thing that's transformed my workflow the most has been Readwise. I did a video a few months back on the Readwise integration that they launched, where you can sync book highlights from Kindle directly into your vault. We'll take a look at what some of this looks like today in the live stream, because that's primarily what I'm working off of. But I'm also part of a beta for Readwise's new reader feature, which is closed beta yet, and but one of the nice things about that is that it allows you to clip articles to it and then highlight those articles, and then those highlights can get synced into your Obsidian Vault too. Or if you're using Notion or Roam Research or another tool like that that has a sync enabled, Evernote as well, those will all come over to whatever tool you're syncing with as well. It's pretty darn helpful to have that whole process automated, because the way I did it before was basically just through Drafts on my iPhone. And Drafts is an application where you just capture notes. I would capture notes in there, and then I would copy them over into a note inside of Obsidian, and it just didn't work very well. It was a lot of friction. It did the job, but using a Kindle and using the Readwise Reader app has just absolutely changed the way that I capture that information. I don't even have to think about getting it. So then when I sit down to do these Think With Me sessions, then basically I just go in and I start looking at the notes, and we're good to go. I'm going to hop over to the screen view now that we're live. If you're just joining with us, do let us know. Let me know where you are in the world in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. See what see what you're working on today. Let me know if there's any questions that you have too about what we're doing, about Obsidian, about workflows that I have. I'm happy to answer those too in this process. The first thing that I'm going to start taking a look at, and I'm probably not going to get any further than this one today, is this book, The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. It is his latest. It just came out within the last year or two. And I think this is really contains a lot of groundbreaking ideas for remote work and for how companies are structured in general. Basically, I'll just summarize the premise of the book is that there are finite games and infinite games. And I apologize if you can hear kids screaming in the background because, you know, I've got kids. It just happens. But there are finite games and there are infinite games. Finite games are ones that have defined players, defined rules, defined time frames. You know who's playing the game, you know who's not playing the game, and there's a defined way on how to play the game. An infinite game is one where none of those things exist. Anyone can join or quit at any time. The game is itself to perpetuate the further playing of the game. And so business is an infinite game. Parenting is an infinite game. You're trying to perpetuate something to go over time. And so the point of this book is digging into what the infinite game is, how it should be applied to business and life and things of that sort. And then I just think a lot of these have some pretty unique and interesting implications for the business world. One of the aspects that he talks about here too is that some thinking about economics and shareholders and things like that in the 1980s or thereabouts caused a shift in the way businesses think about handling people. And instead of looking at people as assets that you can benefit, you can work with, they are people who are, you know, they're seen as, it's the whole point of a company is to serve its shareholders. Let's put it that way. I'm sure if we get down far enough into this, we'll start thinking about this. But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to start doing some progressive summarization, which is a technique where I'm just going to kind of go through and highlight things or bold things that are helpful that I want to come back to or draw my own attention to in the future. And then the next thing that I usually do, or sometimes if it makes sense, I'll split something out and do its own note if I have my own thoughts that I want to share a little bit further. I think this is probably the most important distinction and delineation of an infinite game that he makes here. No matter how successful we are in life, when we die, none of us will be declared the winner of life. It's kind of true. You can do the best you can, but you kind of can't really take any of it with you. I think this also sums up what an infinite game for a company can be. So many corporations are driven to beat their last quarter, to constantly improve revenue growth. But Lego is driven by wanting to build things that are innovative and that reach more kids. It's all about growth. It's about improvement. It's about serving people well. And I think that's an important idea for a lot of us, all of us, to keep in mind, whatever we do. I'm going to take a break here, and I'm using highlights a lot more these days, but I don't want to have to just like go into the command palette and get it. So I'm going to just create a keyboard shortcut. Try Command Shift H. See how that works. If any of you have kept up with tech news a lot lately, there's a lot of talk about crypto and Web3 and all sorts of things of that sort. Metaverse. None of those I really have strong opinions on at this moment in time. But an infinite perspective, in the term that that Cynic is using here, kind of allows us to be able to see the potential of those things and to be able to make decisions to align with a potential future. But when you're playing with a finite mindset, or when you're building a business with a finite mindset, or you're living life that way, you kind of just want to see things the way that they've always been. And then, as he's talking about in this passage here, it's largely focused on reacting to things, and just kind of you're interrupted by new things, where it's like, oh, all of a sudden, Kodak, if you take them for an example, they came along, they invested a lot into photography, and they even innovated in a lot of regards in the realm of digital cameras. But what happened is that they eventually got so focused on revenue that they failed to take into account the new innovations in the technology world, and because of that, they basically disappeared as a brand. I mean, when I was growing up, Kodak was all over the place because film cameras were still the thing. But because the world shifted so much more digitally, a lot of what Kodak did was no longer relevant because they were so fixated upon revenue and growth for their existing market that they were scared to let go of that. Which, I mean, from a strategic standpoint in business, I can totally get that. I understand why businesses often make the choices that they do. But being motivated solely for revenue growth can sometimes get us too myopic, too single focused on something, to miss a broader change that needs to happen. I think this can be beneficial to think about this in our individual lives too. Like, we can get so focused, thinking from a productivity standpoint, on a single end goal or the 5-year career plan that we've laid out for ourselves, that we fail to see how the choices that we're making are affecting us, that they're leading us further into burnout, or our relationships aren't as strong as they should be. And then we can end up in a place that we don't want to be long term because we're failing to take into consideration the holistic picture of how life is operating. I find this interesting too, of how Victorinox switched away from just using, just selling knives, the Swiss Army knives. Hey Ahmed, yeah, I'm planning on trying to make it a more regular thing to do these live streams. The goal is to have them like every Thursday or about once a week or so, but it's it's up in the air yet. I'm still playing with schedules and things like that. What's sustainable for me in the midst of the broader picture of my life. But yeah, I like sitting down and doing these live streams because they're fun. I get to talk with you guys, whereas if I do a video, I don't. It's just me talking to the camera and you watching it some point later in time. I'll still do some videos. I just did one this week, but I like the lives. I found them a lot of fun to do over the course of time. So yeah, planning to keep this more in the repertoire and then trying to do other stuff to help grow the channel as well. Let's see. There's definitely a connection to creativity and range here. I'm glad. Thanks for the feedback there. I'm glad that they're relaxing and informative. I've been finding them fun too because I am such a verbal processor, and for me to be able to just talk through things that I'm learning and sharing them with you just really informally in this this environment on the live stream, it really it allows me to process through it a heck of a lot better. I get more ideas, which is really fun, and then hopefully we all can learn something in the process too. I'm definitely no expert on these things that I'm talking about, but I love sharing the things that I've learned. I've always loved doing that, so I'm glad you're finding them informative. All right. Yeah, so I guess what I'm seeing here in this highlight is especially this sentence here. Executives instinctively start to respond to known factors instead of exploring or advancing unknown possibilities. It's this reliance on what's familiar versus research and development or creative thinking. Some of the most successful companies that I heard of out of the pandemic were the ones who were willing to let go of what they knew and then embrace something as well, something different. I know of a couple of different like events ticketing or event relating services over the course of the pandemic. They were very heavily invested in in-person events. And when the pandemic hit off, it obviously like that completely went away for a period of time. And in a lot of places, it's still gone. But one of the things that I saw happen with the people who navigated that successfully is that they were willing to let go of what they had planned on doing. And instead of clinging to in-person events for dear life and just slashing their company as far as they could go, without completely tearing it apart, there were a few that I heard of that they pivoted pretty hard towards digital events or something relating to events, and it actually allowed them to be more successful than they were previously. If you have Discovery Plus, which my wife and I are a fan of, the first season of the show, The Lost Kitchen, I think is an interesting example of this as well, because Erin French, the founder of this high-end restaurant in the middle of nowhere in Maine, she found herself, on the verge of having to figure, with the pandemic and everything hitting, trying to figure out how the heck she could keep her restaurant still going. And so it led her to start kind of a farmer's market and then doing outdoor dinners and things like that. So she had to find a way to pivot what she was doing to still create an experience in the midst of crisis. So it's having the ability to take a step back and let go of the circumstance. I think is really important to be able to navigate any sort of difficult situation, whether we're businesses or individuals. Magical Cherubim saying, interesting how many books Simon Sinek already wrote. Would be happy to be able to write only one day. I know. And then you take into consideration like Cal Newport. He's written, goodness, probably 5 or 6 books. And then Nicholas Luhmann, the guy who made the Zettelkasten method, that's kind of the modern method, is based off of his methodology. I think he had some prolific number of papers that he wrote in the field of sociology. It's kind of amazing, the amount of output. But I suppose like when you can academically give your life to something, it's easier to write books. And when you have a personality like Simon Sinek, who's drawn a lot of and when he's drawn a lot of attention to himself for how he approaches things, like he's really hit a nerve in modern society on the needs in the business world and the needs for leadership. He's in some ways like in different aspects, kind of like a modern day John Maxwell, Zig Ziglar, people of that sort. He doesn't really take it more of like the personal executive coach or productivity side of things like those folks did, but he's really approaching the broad concepts of leadership and how seeing people as people in the business world is so transformative and beneficial. And then approaching it, like with this mindset, the infinite game on business is very beneficial to businesses. It allows them to be more flexible. It allows them to grow. It allows them to outlast their founders or even their markets, which I think is very interesting. Oh, that's really fascinating. That's really, really interesting. I love, thanks for sharing that, Magical Cherubim. In the future, I realize that my lower third is in the way here. Let me remove that quick so you can see his chat message, but I'll read it. Magical Cherubim says, I studied at the university where Nicholas Luhmann was teaching back then. In the sociology classes, they still talk about him with so much admiration. It seems like he was a pretty interesting person to be able to dig into a field so deeply as he did and to care about it so much that he would organize his information and really try to figure out what the best way forward is. I think that's super cool. Ahmed, I think you're right too. It is a fine line, because you're right. You can't just live toward a future state all the time, and you can't just constantly be changing, to try to figure out the next thing. You do have to commit to a direction. You do have to commit to improving now. You have to commit to optimizing for what you can. But you definitely have to find a balance between both of them. It's really a tension between like the possibility of the future and the reality of now. You can't just be in one or the other. Otherwise, you're gonna miss out on stuff. Like if you constantly just live in the moment, you're gonna miss out on the potential for the things that could come from planning. Or if you just constantly live planning for the future, you're going to miss out on the most important things for the moment. And I think when we can find a balance somewhere in the middle, I think that's the best. And I think that's honestly what a lot of productivity advice tries to hit at, is finding a balance somewhere in the middle. Some of them tend to be more on the end of planning, and others tend to be more on the end of living more in the moment. But there's really a line in the middle somewhere that allows people to, as individuals, walk, I think, in a place of balance with that. It's not easy. It doesn't happen automatically. I'm still trying to figure that out myself. I'm one who tends to overcomplicate things pretty easily. And so when I try too much to invest to improve the current state of things, I 100% go overboard. Or if I'm get in a mode where I'm trying to think to the future and adapt to new situations, then yeah. I think what's interesting though about this specific book though is this idea of the just cause. And I think this is what kind of helps companies stay on track. It's a vision of sorts. And so you have an idea of why you exist. So for example, Apple, they had a vision to have computer in every household, basically, to make it available, a personal computer available for everyone and accessible to everyone. And in a lot of ways, they succeeded at that. But if Apple were to say in the mid-90s, oh, well, that's not really what we want. They lost sight of that and said, we've got all this other stuff over here that we could be implementing and doing. They would not probably be in existence today. So like having something like a just cause, which he says here is a specific vision for a future state that doesn't exist yet, that it has to meet 5 standards, must be for something, open to all those who would like to contribute, affirmative and optimistic. Okay, that formatting didn't come through very well. But anyway, there's a few different characteristics to it. And it's a vision that inspires people to act and move together in a certain direction. And so I think that's something that's very interesting to think about in that regard. So, if you don't have a just cause, then yeah, you're probably going to try to adapt to all sorts of different situations that are coming at you, or you'll over-optimize for the current state of business. But if you have a just cause, it gives you a target of where you're going to a future state, and it allows you an evaluation point to say, is this the future state that we're headed to? Does reality match up with this? Does it make sense in relation to reality to keep going towards this thing, or do we need to make an adjustment one direction or the other? So like with Kodak, I think he actually gets to this example later on. They had a just cause that had to do with photography and people capturing moments and things of that sort. But then they lost sight of that just cause because they optimized for business success, and it caused them to miss out on the opportunity to pivot to continue toward their just cause, but with the environment changing around them. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff here. Thought this was interesting as well, that it's got to be a vision that something others can envision as well, because it ignites our passions. It's part of one of the reasons why I work. My full-time job is for Discourse, the community platform that's open source, is because I believe in the just cause that we stand for about creating a more civilized internet, about decentralizing away from big platforms like Facebook or even Discord. Nothing against them in and of themselves, but if everything centralizes, then everybody's kind of caught in that trap. And so we say, we want to give people the tools to be able to do that. So that's a vision that I can envision myself. But without that, we would just be another community platform. And it's a lot harder to draw people into that when you're just like, yeah, just here, we're a Facebook group alternative. Okay, why? And defining that why, I think, is the most important thing. because that's what helps people visualize what you're for. I think this is a key point in the book here too, about culture. Being able to fund its own existence, profitability is how a company actually stays in the game for the long term. I think it's quite interesting actually that a lot of tech companies are so outside funded, and a lot of them, even through the heavy growth that they do, are not always all that profitable. You know, and you have, like, Twitter became a behemoth, and it wasn't even profitable. And they've been trying to fight and find a way to monetize their existence for ages, and I don't even know if they've got that figured out yet. Obviously, I don't know the internal workings of Twitter, but I do find it interesting that the companies that tend to make the biggest impact are the ones that are most focused on their target market instead of trying to grow as big as they possibly can. But then also, they've found a way early on to fund their own existence. They're not deficit spending or running on infinite VC money to do so. They're not trying to grow in a hyper fast way. I kind of wonder if some of that mindset the other direction, where there's a lot of funding. Yeah, I think you're right. Silicon Valley phenomenon for you. I think it's really interesting, though, if you think about it. It's like I kind of wonder if some of that results in some of the toxic trends that we've seen in places like social media, because there's been such a fight for monetization out of the place of funding, that instead of building a strong culture founded on values, it's a lot of times a weak culture in some regards. Again, I'm speaking in generalities here because I don't know all the specifics and all the circumstances. But if it comes from a weak culture that's guided towards, a vision, maybe even some kind of a just cause, but that it's more about hypergrowth. I'm not really a fan of that mentality of running a business. There's also Company of One by Paul Jarvis. He's running the Fathom analytics software these days. It's a small company similar to Plausible Analytics, which I'm running on my properties that I have on the internet. Yep, value to monetization. Totally agree. Totally agree. Yeah, I think that actually ties back to the idea we were talking about a little bit earlier with the shift in the 1980s for public companies to value serving shareholders over serving the people that they serve and serving their employees as well. And that's part of the big idea that Cynic's pushing back against in this book, is that instead of growing your company for more money, that money becomes a byproduct of growing your company and serving people well. It also kind of ties to some of Seth Godin's ideas around marketing, because he really talks a lot about serving, like the people you seek to serve. Most marketers will call that your target audience, but he specifically terms it the people you seek to serve, because it's about service. You're providing a service to people through talking about your product or talking about what you're selling. And it's so much more about serving those people's needs than it is about selling something to make a buck. There's definitely, so I guess all this to say is that there's kind of this antithesis movement that's rising up in the business world. I have not yet read Start With Why, Magical Cherubim, I've read Leaders Eat Last, and I've read The Infinite Game. I guess I've kind of gone backwards in the Simon Sinek trilogy of books. So yeah, I've got to hit that one up, because I think that's probably another important concept that ties all the pictures together. It seems like his books are pretty heavily related. Like, he talks a little bit about this idea of the infinite game in Leaders Eat Last, which is his second book. But that one emphasizes other principles. This one talks about a lot of the same principles, but from a completely different perspective. And so they both provide unique perspectives on around similar things, but they do so in a way that's actually valid and really helpful. Yeah, I think this is an interesting comparison here. That growth as your cause for a company, we exist to grow, is like eating to get fat. I think he called that one out pretty clearly there. Also, just kind of to speak a little meta here, looking at this, a lot of times when I'm reading through Kindle, I'll highlight a section, and sometimes I'll type out a note that's either like summarizing it like I did here, because basically this is what he says in this sentence, and I just noted it out because that was the thing that stood out to me the most about that section, and I highlighted more just to give some context. But other times I'll just highlight something because it kind of speaks for itself, or I'll make a note here to say that this is a key business point. I know I highlighted this book a little differently than I've done other ones. Like in Leaders Eat Last, I'll pull that one up here to take a look at. Which moment were you referring to, Ahmed? I know there's a little bit of lag in the stream. But like on Leaders Eat Last, like here, I didn't do any note taking at all. So I've just been kind of experimenting with what works. Yeah, that's that was kind of a deep moment for me too. There's a lot of people that think that their main goal is to grow, and that's not true. It's all about the people that you seek to serve. And if we lose sight of the people that we seek to serve, then we have a big problem. Then we're drifting into territory that is kind of dangerous. But I think I'm going to start wrapping up the stream here. I'm going to pop back over to my camera. But I wanted to spend a couple moments just thanking you all for joining today. If you've got any questions too before we wrap up, be sure to throw them in the chat box. Again, if you're watching and if you haven't said hi, do so in the chat. I would love to hear where you're from. Or if you're watching this after the fact, leave a comment below. One thing I am thinking about doing and toying with at some point is potentially doing the video on demands of these live stream, adding them on a separate YouTube channel, because sometimes these long form pieces of content in a on a channel posted after the fact does weird stuff to the YouTube algorithm. So I still want to be able to do these, and so this is where the live streams would be happening in the future. But if I decide to do this other channel, I'll be sure to link it on the live streams, and then also promote it in other places as well if you want to watch these after the fact. But yeah, I think this has been kind of fun. I really do enjoy doing these live streams and be able to talk out these ideas. I hope you all have been finding interesting things to think about as a result of this, or working through your own notes and thinking through things there as well. One of the biggest things that I like to do is just connect ideas, and being able to go back through is something that I think is really, really beneficial to do. Yeah, Ahmed, So one of the streamers that I follow, I'm not much really into gaming or anything like that, but I follow Epos Vox on YouTube, and I know he's mentioned that, and other folks that I've been following in the YouTube realm of things have said, yeah, like Channel Makers, which is another channel that I follow. They've been saying a lot lately, like if you do more live stream or podcast formatting on your channel, it can really affect your channel. So like I know I'm probably going to end up doing live streams probably more consistently than I'm going to be doing published videos. And so I'll probably end up unlisting a lot of them and then uploading the full versions at a later point in time. I have just completely shifted around all of my editing software and stuff. I'm learning a new software. I'm using DaVinci Resolve now instead of using ScreenFlow on the Mac because I'm on Windows and I don't really feel like paying for the whole Adobe suite. But Resolve is super powerful, even the free version. So if you're into YouTube videos or anything like that, definitely check that out. But yeah, I'm going to wrap things up here for the stream. Thanks so much for joining me today. I do plan on doing more of these. The tentative schedule is Thursday afternoons, Central Time, about 1 o'clock. There will be events for it. We're also broadcasting live on LinkedIn and on Twitter as well, so you can feel free to tune in from either of those locations. Hello to everyone who has joined from those too. Again, my name's Justin with Effective Remote Work. Thanks for joining in on this Think With Me Thursday.